Welcome to the Improvising Life podcast, where we explore how life can be more livable. This is Lori Crawford, your host. I'm super excited for this episode because so many of you contributed to it. So I put up in my Instagram stories this sort of call for responses to two questions. The first one being, what are some of the adulting tasks that you just hate the most? What are the ones that just drain you, that, so she speaks, that just thinking about them can put you in a sour mood? And then the second question was, what are your current favorite joy practices? And I think this is a really expected or anticipated observation that there were far more responses to what parts of adulting are really draining than what responses were provided for joy practices, right? There aren't as many, oh, she's funny. There aren't as many people who perhaps had the space of even considering what a current joy practice is. And I just want to normalize that first before we move any further, because there is so little room for joy in adulting with the way that things are currently set up, right? Because it seems like a luxury when really it's like I believe it's a true foundation or a source of nourishment, that if we aren't able to access more play and ease and joy, that makes the weight of adulting so much heavier and so much more adulting and so much more stifling. It makes adulting seem like something that is the only thing that can exist. So I want to spend some time, playing with this idea of sort of gifting the mundane a bit of magic, or also, really like what this looks like in practice is adulting with our inner bebe, right? Like having that youthful part of us that perhaps was really shut down and, we were told that we had to grow out of, like grow up, be a functional adult, as if that meant we had to leave that more playful, spirited, more refreshed part of ourselves behind, right? Otherwise, we can't possibly be adulting correctly if we're not miserable, right? So, how can we sort of shake that up? And so with all of your really wonderful and much appreciated contributions in my Instagram stories, I put together this podcast episode. And so to sort of set the stage, I just want to name that there are these really monotonous, mundane, joy killers, right? And how can we name those and then shift in this place of life being more livable, because we're able to see the power of having joy practices, right? And how life-giving it is. And not just life-giving, it's life-sustaining. It helps us not be depleted to begin with, whereas it's almost like we're expected to deplete ourselves and then, find a way to nurse ourselves back to any sense of well-being, or to really just another level or variation of surviving. So I'm just really curious about how we can interrupt this depletion cycle, and instead of getting to the point where we are already having an empty cup, how can we be simultaneously filling our cup as we have to empty it out a bit, right? And so this language came through, and I want to preface this that I know it's yeah, Mercury, that it sounds like intense language, and it's really intentional, right? So we're going to be hold on, Mercury's going to share for a moment. Yeah. This is my greatest joy practice, as I start sharing something and Mercury has her own variation, letting her share that out and just gaining all that wisdom she's sharing as her little feet are kicking out of her little chair like she's on a roller coaster and blowing some bubbles. Really, so this language that came through was, sort of the first question that I'd asked people about what adulting tasks just sort of suck your soul. The language later came through as those are joy poachers, right? And that language is intense and it's intentional, right? Because as adulting exists right now, and the structures that we're operating in, especially in the West, those expectations of what adulting looks like does come from this really colonized, extractive, problematic, whiteness-based expectation and lens, as is poaching, right? Poaching being this disregard for life or well-being and just taking and extracting, right? So there are these experiences, these expectations, these practices or tasks that we have to do to function, to make ends meet, that are joy poachers. And what happens when we're able to combine them with joy practices, right? Does that again allow us to acknowledge in one aspect of the moment we're pouring out of our cup? And then also, how can we be pouring back into our cup with something more nourishing, so we're not getting to the point of an empty cup or being really depleted or burnt out? What if there can be this balance of poaching and practicing joy? So some of the responses to sort of the joy poachers, 2 people responded with taxes, right? And so at the time of this is in May, so it's after tax season, but still really fresh in people's mind, and often a source of trauma, really, of having to go through that process. We also had the response of sorting and throwing out old papers, cleaning, mowing the grass, doing the dishes, making appointments or calling strangers of any sort of task, and then deciding on what to cook, and then prepping dinner for our family, right? Because of this sort of dislike or lack of fondness for cooking. Some of the joy practices shared were dancing, planting flowers, movies, sitting in gardens, laughing with family, nature walks, lifting weights, and singing. And so when I saw this list, right, so I wrote out, the list of poachers and then practices, and I saw some that felt like really obvious pairings, but I wanted to sort of challenge myself to reimagine different combinations for this balance, this idea of, as I'm having to do something that feels depleting, how can I be resourcing, and if you haven't listened to the last episode, I would do that afterwards, of this idea of how are we resourcing ourselves. So I shared 5 different types of sources that we can reconnect to. And so I wanted to play a little bit about where these combinations could be coming from. And so I want to share out some of these pairings, and hopefully those of you who responded to stories and submitted your joy poachers and your joy practices, that any of these pairings, especially for the categories that you shared, could be something that you explore with. And I would love to hear back on whether you do that and how that goes for you, right? Because this is all about giving yourself permission to play and to just see what happens, right? And I was trying to make sure I paired these in a sensible way, sensible meaning like their safety's kept in mind, that if there's any absolute necessities, like legal things like taxes, that you're still able to comply with those and not have an additional situation to navigate. So that being said, I have 7 pairings that I want to share out for us to play with. The first one is sorting papers and watching movies. And this is one that I often do, that I actually, it's an invitation for myself to revisit, is swapping out sorting papers with also going through and cleaning out my email inbox. So really putting on a movie, something that I've seen that I really love, so that way I would still be sort of paying attention, but I won't be afraid to miss something, and then I can just sort of start tackling, oh gosh, I have over 10,000 emails literally that I need to go through, right? But this idea of, as you're sorting through something, can you be replenishing yourself with another sort of landscape or scenery that you're seeing? Because movies can transport you somewhere else. So what would it be like to be filing or sorting through papers in this other place? So picking a movie perhaps where you love the place it transports you to. And does that sort of energetic change of scenery change your experience of sorting through papers? The second pairing was taxes and sitting in the garden. And what came to mind with this was, I've seen commercials offering, virtual tax services. So could you, if that's something accessible for you, could you schedule that and then be sitting in your garden or in your favorite nature space and being able to be in a more serene environment and not a stuffy office, that can have more of a overwhelming energy. So that way you're able to approach, this idea of being able to ground into something more supportive while something really depleting like taxes is happening and taking place. The third pairing is mowing the grass and singing. I really thought of my husband with this one. It was his response that mowing grass was his joy poacher, which I do know about him, obviously. And I often see him while he's mowing the grass, with his headphones on, he's listening to something. But I was curious about whether, this idea as Mercury sings, of singing could be this exchange where it's like you're almost having this moment of trying to out-sing the lawnmower, right? Like, who's going to be the loudest, who's going to have the best rhythm or tempo, who is really conveying their emotionality more, right? And so this idea of mowing the grass and singing came through, and just like how funny that would be, and knowing he's more reserved than I would be more likely if I wasn't allergic to grass and I was able to mow grass, to be singing and not care what the neighbors thought. But if you're listening to this, babe, it's a little challenge to just explore and see how it would feel to start singing while mowing the grass. The fourth one is one that I actually do all the time. So this was less of a stretch, but it's one that I think is under sort of utilized, is this idea of washing dishes while dancing. I've found that moving my body in a way that I enjoy while doing something that I don't enjoy, like dishes, can really help me see more of like this sort of orchestrated effort, right? It's a way for me to almost have this choreography of, I'm going to wash the cups to this song. I'm going to wash all the pots and pans to this song that has like a heavier beat. And then when it gets time for the silverware, I'm going to go ahead and play my favorite Latin hits channel, because that's going to have the most upbeat percussion, and I'm going to be playing with the silverware in the sink, or, this idea that you can have a playlist that you're dancing to specifically for when you're doing dishes. Mercury is so funny. Just a side note, anytime I'm recording like this or in a session with someone is when she's the most vocal. When I'm not sharing out, she's like really silent, and it's because I have an undefined throat in human design and she has a defined throat, so as I'm sharing, I'm amplifying, and so then she's like, actually I have something to say. That cracks me up. All right, and now the fifth pairing is what I put, like, dinner and family fun. So this was combining the response of really deciding on what to cook for dinner and prepping it is a joy poacher, because there's just, especially with you already, if you don't like cooking, it's one of those monotonous, every single day you have to do it task, right? And it can also, while this wasn't something that was shared, just want to normalize that this can be a part of decision fatigue, right? It's like having to always decide what to cook. You're constantly making decisions, and especially if there's different dietary needs for each person, that all of that just makes it more exhausting. So I have this curiosity, right, of having this like dinner and family fun component where instead of it being more of like a exchange of what I'm preparing you dinner, what if family can be more a part of the process? And pause. I know that for those of us who can often be in control mode in the kitchen or just wanting to get something done, that can be triggering, right? Of asking for help or to be giving tasks to someone else. And also, what if there can be this sort of gamification, right? What if one day a week even, you're asking someone in the family, okay, you go grab 2 items from the fridge. Someone else, go grab 2 items from the pantry. Someone else, go grab 1 item from the shelf. Coming together and then putting on a timer for 2 minutes and saying, what do you think we can make out of this? How can we pair this up? Granted, it may not end up being the most delectable dinner, but that idea gives you this practice of shifting expectation, right? Suddenly you don't have to be this like culinary award-winning chef, and you don't have to just be in this place of only of service, of creating something for someone else. It can start to be this way that the family is making decisions together. And through that process, it can also give those that you're preparing food for a different understanding, a more nuanced appreciation for something that you have to do every single day. And this goes also with the part of like dinner cleanup. Oh, there's like a huge truck going by in the background. We'll just let them pass. Also, at least for me, the dinner cleanup is what is more of a joy poacher for me than the actual cooking, and gamifying that too. So, okay, we're going to put on a 30-second timer. Let's see how many dishes we can get in the dishwasher, or who can dry the dishes fastest, understandably not doing knives that way, like, again, putting on our what's our safe and accessible goggles, right? But having that approach to dinner and family fun. Mercury. The sixth pairing, yes, sixth, is appointments and planting flowers. And the person that shared out the appointments part, if you listen to this, you know that you're one of my favorite people ever. And so I was thinking about, and this came together really as something that I can so see you doing. So if you have headphones or wireless headphones, Bluetooth, some way to be able to be on your phone without necessarily using your hands, how can you be tending to your garden or planting something or being outside in this cultivating or like curating way while making appointments? Because appointments often have a lot of idle time. You might be put on hold. You might be asked to repeat things a lot. And so if you're able to be tilling or moving around in a garden and really being able to have like this physical grounding that's happening, I'm just curious on whether that offers this different sense of energy exchange. And, you know, and whether or not, you know, while you're on hold, instead of listening to their horrible choice in elevator music, you're instead like talking to your begonias. I think those are plants, or like, you know, like asking the mint how it's doing. You know, it's like it can give you this idea of, instead of talking to strangers on the phone, you can also be spending the sort of in-between time talking to your plants and your flowers, and really like having this connection to the idea of why you're calling to make these appointments, how that's going to be planting the seeds for maybe a different level of health. Maybe it's a health appointment you're planning, or calling someone to schedule something in the future, you know, even that's an oil change, just something where it'll give you a different quality of life once the physical call is made and once the appointment is had. And that sort of reminder that tilling in a garden or like cultivating something, planting something, isn't for an immediate response. It's sort of that commitment to a longer gestation, so to speak. And the last pairing that came through that kind of made me giggle, but I'm curious to try out, is this idea of pairing cleaning as the poacher, the joy poacher, with with this combination of nature time and weightlifting. And what came to mind here is, how many things do we have to clean out? Let's say we have to sort through a bunch of clothes or files or something, that we can physically move to an outdoor space and be sitting outside and going through it and letting that fresher energy go through it. It might help us make decisions of what to keep, what to store, what to sell or to donate or to get rid of, right? And then the idea of, as we're cleaning inside maybe the house or things that involve more movement-based cleaning, how can there be this idea of weightlifting, right? So if you're someone who enjoys movement or weightlifting, how can you bring in some of that muscle memory, those mechanics, into how you clean? Does your experience sweeping or mopping change if you're looking at it as, oh, I enjoy doing lunges or squats. How can I safely incorporate this part of my practice through the idea of cleaning, right? How can I do some squats into tricep press as I'm dusting or, you know, getting cobwebs off the wall? How can I be resorting or, you know, moving my winter clothes into storage and getting my spring clothes with this idea of weightlifting? So really like allowing there to be this energy exchange where you're getting the, you know, the hormones and the endorphins that you appreciate from weightlifting as you're cleaning and shifting the energy and moving things around that maybe fall into the more mundane, oh, I need to do this task. You know, and one thing also that's coming through with this idea is even approaching like changing your linens or your bedding with this idea of weightlifting. And so those were the 7 pairings that came through. And, you know, I'm just curious on whether anyone, if you try any of them or if you have any of your own. And this is leading to this larger conversation that I'll be having in the next few episodes, of really about my relationship with time and how we can re-envision how we connect with time in this sort of nexus with adulting and being more youthful and playful, and how we can create some spaces and practices that feel more nourishing and less depleting. Thank you again for everyone who participated in Instagram stories. That was so fun and like really nice to have that to riff off of. And I hope to connect with you more in that space, and reach out and let me know if you try any of these combinations or pairings, or even what your initial reaction is to hearing them. Thank you so much for listening. As always, have a razzle-dazzle day, and if that's not accessible, put an F on front and have a frazzle-dazzle day.